Okay, so welcome everybody to this, the last in the series of the CRCN events, Black Females in STEM, which Emmanuel, Adukwu and myself will be hosting. And we've got three fantastic speakers, Nike Folayan, Efua, Akumanyi, and Amara Anyogu. Sorry, I pronounced your name wrong already. Just to kind of say what we'll be doing. So we will be asking each of the speakers to give a little bit of a talk about their career journeys, and we'll be asking a few questions, and then we'll be opening it to the floor in terms of questions. And at that point, if you want to ask questions, and we'll repeat this at the end, you can either raise your hand and raise your hands if you want to be unmuted, or put questions in the chat line, and hopefully we will pick them up, or Sean, who's doing the techie bit of it, will assist in pointing us to questions. So if I just introduce two speakers, and then Emmanuel will introduce Amara. Dr. Nike Folayan MBE is a chartered electronics engineer with a doctorate in electronics engineering. She's currently technical director and the technical discipline leader for the within transport and infrastructure division of WSP, an engineering consultant, and she leads a team of telecommunications engineers in the UK and India, working on a variety of projects within the transport sector in the UK, Australia, Middle East and Africa. She's also a fellow of the Institution of Engineering and Technology. Nike is chair and co-founder of AFBE UK, which is a not-for-profit organisation which promotes higher achievements in education and engineering, particularly among people from Black and minority ethnic backgrounds. Nike was featured in Britain's 100 Most Influential People of African and Caribbean Heritage in 2012 Power List. She's also a trustee at STEMET's Futures and Engineering UK. She's been awarded an MBE for Diversity in Engineering in the Queen's 2020 Honours List. Nike's vision is to continue to empower people all around the world using engineering as a platform for change. So moving on to Efua. Efua Akumanyi is the head of tech and training in codingblackfemales.com and the co-founder and head of technology of www.furnishfulco.co.uk, a shopping discovery site for furniture and homewares. Efua graduated from Sussex with a BSc in Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence in 2001 and went on to work as a software developer for 15 years. Efua is passionate about encouraging other women into tech, whether it's finding jobs in the industry or starting their own business. She's a member of several women in tech groups and speaks on subjects ranging from AI to entrepreneurship. Emmanuel, do you want to introduce Amara?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good evening. I will introduce Dr. Amara Anyogu. So my name is Emmanuel Adukwu, and thank you for the introduction earlier. And I'll introduce Dr. Amara Anyogu, who is our third speaker. Dr. Amara Anyogu is a lecturer in microbiology at the University of Westminster. She's got a PhD in microbiology and a BSc in microbiology as well. Dr. Amara is also the founder of Aspiring Professionals Hub, a platform which is a professional development training space, and someone who I would say is a good friend, a dear friend, and we've created a platform together over the last 5 years with a reach of over 180 countries. She is also the co-creator of the Nigerian Association of Microbiologists, a new organization which supports Nigerian applied microbiologists, who are either in Nigeria and also in the diaspora. And she previously served as a secretary of the Early Career Scientist Committee for the Society of Applied Microbiology. This is about over 10 years ago, which is a group that actually was one of the leading groups for early career science and early career scientists for any societies in the country and actually across the globe. So she's a leading scientist in her own right. Her research is around the areas of food microbes, beneficial microbes, and some of the work she also does is actually serving as a chief operating officer for JR Biotech Foundation, where she leads a team there, and she's very active on social media. So you can catch her on Amara Tweets, where she spills a lot of great science, a lot of great words, and a lot of great stuff.
Great. Okay, so first question to Nike. So we'd like to hear about your career journey, how you got here and why that particular career. You're on mute at the moment, Nike.
Dear. Oh dear. Apologies. Apologies for that. Yeah, no, so thank you for this fantastic opportunity, and just hearing even about the other speakers. I feel very privileged to have been invited to do this. In terms of, I've been told I've got like a short time limit, so I'm going to cram a lot of things into this really short time to tell you about my own career path. So I'm a very girly girl. That's not to say that there's anything wrong with not being a girly girl, but I find that a lot of people that talk about, oh, I became an engineer, like to talk about how they were playing with Legos and stuff. No, I actually quite liked my dolls, and I liked that sort of thing. So I wasn't the one. If you were going to pick out in a crowd who would be an engineer, you probably wouldn't pick me. And I think there's a lesson in that don't let other people, I like to do this when I talk, so I like to give like the lessons as I go along. So don't let other people determine what you do with your life and what you become, because only you knows what you want to do and what you want to achieve, and just focus on that. But I really liked television. I loved television. I just thought it was fascinating, and not for the reasons of, oh, there's a program on the telly. My reasons were, how did it get those little people in the boxes? So I was really curious about that. And we had this television with the PCB, the green PCB boards that you could see, and I used to poke it. I used to try and poke it with things to see if maybe one of the little people might come out and, be my friend. Just tells you how many friends I had. But so the other message is that if you do have children, or if you do have nephews, the fact that they like TV or gaming and stuff like that, which society tells us it's not good, it might be what might inspire them to consider careers in engineering and STEM. Now, for me, I liked physics, I liked maths, I hated chemistry. I really hated chemistry. I still do now, actually, because I never really understood it. That just gives you like a picture of who I am. So when I did say to my family that I wanted to study electronics, because I thought electronics was different from engineering, my mom thought, oh, you just go and electrocute yourself, so it's not a good idea. And because I had teachers that were saying, oh, she's really good at the drawing side of things, she kind of felt that my skill set didn't match. So it was a real struggle. This didn't make any sense to me because my brother was already studying to become an engineer. So I thought, why am I different? But yeah, I'm the sort of person that once you say I can't do something, then I will go out of my way within reason to prove that I can. So I studied the engineering degree, and I thought, I studied the degree and I'll get a job and I'll be happy. And I found that I wasn't, because first off, I studied engineering out of curiosity rather than because I thought, oh yeah, it'll give me a good career and it'll give me a good job. So, when, again, it's another lesson that sometimes it's not about, it's not, don't judge people based on what their interests are, because you don't know what it could lead to. So, so at that point, I thought, I'll go and get a job, and I got a job, and I was on site with a group of men who had a lot of things to say that really put me off being on site, because they were really nice, genuinely really nice people, but constantly the remarks about women, you know, the way, what are you doing on site? Shouldn't you be somewhere else? Can you make us a cup of tea and stuff like that? Really put me off. And so I thought, you know, maybe I need to go back and study. So I went back and I studied, and I studied towards my PhD. I was really, really lucky because my PhD was kind of in collaboration with a company. So I was working as an employee for an organization and studying. So I had that luck, and I'm really grateful for that opportunity. Now, after my PhD, I'm trying to rush through because I know we haven't got all day, and I won't tell you what I had for lunch. But after my a PhD, I thought I wanted to work in industry and really start to talk to people, because I was kind of siloed working in research because I was doing research. So I was working in the research space, and I didn't feel that I had that connection with people. And I'm the sort of person that likes to talk to people. So I moved to a company called McDonald with all the aspirations of the world, saying, you know, I've got my doctorate now. Well, I hadn't got my doctorate. I was kind of at the end of it, and I started this job. And then when I got into the company, I realized I literally got the manager from hell. I honestly believe that he was a demon sent from the devil to come and torment me, because it was an awful experience. From the very first day I got there, it was quite bad. But I was able to work my way through. And this is a lesson for you, that sometimes even in those really tough environments, there might be someone or another person that you can reach out to that can give you the opportunity. So even in that tough environment, I was able to find someone that had an interest in radio design, which was my thing. And I literally latched onto the person. I said, put me on your project. And that's how I was able to get away from this human, demon, I don't know which one, whichever you call it. And so that was the start of my journey towards discovering who I am and discovering my abilities, because that person then gave me the tools to feel confident about my abilities. And then I carried on. I took a detour. I went and worked as a systems engineer for a while because I thought maybe telecoms wasn't a thing. I should try something else. So always be open to trying something else. I tried that and I thought, no, you know, I really, really like being a telecommunications engineer. So I got this opportunity at WSP. In the meantime, there were lots of things happening around ethnicity, and at the time Tony Blair said that Black culture was responsible for crime. I have got the article. I was really, really annoyed about it, because I thought, you know, I'm an engineer. I think there's something wrong here. If my whole culture is responsible for crime, I should be out, like, you know, I should be out stabbing people or something. And that's how myself and my brother got together, and we created AFBE. But I don't want to hog the time, because I know there's lots to hear about with other people. So I kind of stop there, if that's okay with everybody. And I'm open to questions at the end or more information. Thank you.
And I think you're on mute at the moment.
So yes, I think we'll have lots of questions, you know, about, but also just lots of lessons about, you know, kind of, you know, sort of maneuvering and, you know, route planning in terms of how you kind of get from A to Z by a very sort of zigzag route. I think it's really interesting. So Efua, would you like to say something about yourself and your career, and how you got from there to here?
Okay, yeah, I would. So yeah, hi, my name's Efua Akumanyi, and I am currently the head of tech, or head of training in tech at Clothing Black Females, responsible for creating a lot of their training content for the boot camps that we run, helping to upskill and bring more Black women into tech. And my journey started, I suppose, I was the typical like to play with guys' toys or boys' toys, or Lego and electronics, and put together cars as a kid. My brother had all those toys. I had My Little Pony and dollies, and I went to play with his He-Man and his Transformers. But so I was quite a tomboy. And I think the benefit of that for me was that I didn't see any reason why women couldn't do whatever they wanted to do. So these kind of roles that are sometimes you are told or directed to, and directed it away from, if you're a woman, I didn't see any reason why I couldn't do that. So I decided to do a degree in computer science and artificial intelligence. I actually did completely unrelated secondary school subjects or A-level subjects. I was actually convinced I was going to do psychology, so I did a psychology like A-level and English, and that was a very literature loving background I came from. My dad was a journalist, my mum was also did lots to do with writing. She actually has written 2 books, but I thought tech, because you know that was like something that nobody in my family had even considered doing, so I could carve my own path in it, I felt. And I did my degree, and I was lucky enough to, when I finished, go directly into a role at a medical software company, which worked in the kind of the AI programming language that I learned at university. And a very small subset of people knew how to program in things like Prolog, and I managed to get a job doing logic programming systems at this software development company. And I stayed there for 9 years. And again, I was kind of lucky because the head of that department was a woman. And what happens then is that if your first job, you've got heads of departments being women, albeit no black people, apart from myself, I thought, again, why there's no barrier to where I could go. When I then left that company, I became a contractor because I wanted to get a lot of experience. After staying in there for 10 years, you kind of work on a small subset of code, and I wanted to experience lots of different verticals, lots of different kind of types of code. So I went and became a contractor for another 10 years. And during that journey, I started my own company. I created this company called Furniture. It's an aggregator company. It's still out there and it's up and running. And I am the lead developer as well as the head of tech. I had 2 other people who worked with me. And it was at that point I thought, okay, so I've done all these jobs and I've done all these roles, and I'm still pretty much the only black person I meet who's a developer. And certainly nobody in management. And I had then stumbled across this company called Coding Black Females, or company. It's more like a group, a meetup group, an Eventbrite meetup group of like 10 women who also were in tech, and thought, where are all the other black people in tech? Because I can't be the only one. So we got this group together, and we started attending it, and it has just grown since then. We've got 3,000 members. We run multiple programs, partnership with over 100 companies, and we're really about encouraging women into these programming and tech roles. We want to, increase people not only from graduates in, but also try and get people who are middle management up to more leadership roles as well, because that's really how you change the face of companies. If you help retain the staff and you have the people in decision-making positions. So that is the short version of my life too.
Great, thanks. And I think, again, very interesting, and also a lesson about doing unrelated A-levels, I think is quite interesting about, it's not always a traditional route that people take in terms of where they end up. Okay, Amara, would you like to?
Of course. Thank you so much for the invitation. Now I kind of feel like the odd one out, because when I saw, I'm such a bookish girl that when I saw slides, I just thought, okay, I'll do the slides. So let me try and share my screen and see if I can get those slides up. Let's see. Can you see my screen? Okay.
Yes.
So, okay, thank you very much. So again, thank you for the invitation. I'm inspired already by the speakers. So many parallels and so many contrasts in my journey as well. I think for me, I can't remember really playing with much when I was little. I don't know what I played with. But microbiology, I like to think about it as whether I don't know if I found microbiology or microbiology found me, but like many people I knew at the time who kind of studied microbiology, we were kind of people who wanted to study medicine at some point in our lives. And I think all through being in secondary school, which I had in Nigeria, I'd always thought that I was going to be a medical doctor, and somehow it didn't quite connect. And so, microbiology was something actually that someone suggested, because, you either did microbiology, biochemistry, or botany or something like that. But coming into microbiology and sitting in that first lesson and just being confronted with this quote by Louis Pasteur, an eminent microbiologist, about how important small things were, got me really intrigued. I mean, we are sitting all in our different spaces having this event virtually because of a virus that we cannot see. So small things are definitely really important. But my journey into, I kind of stumbled, I guess, into microbiology, but I really fell in love with it. I was so committed that I did my bachelor's degree. Even when I moved to the UK and had an opportunity to change the degree, I said, no, I really love it. Although I wasn't really connecting it at the time to what would a career look like. So I did spend quite a lot of time as an undergraduate student, really thinking about what comes next. I remember first year was fine, but second year I began to panic. What do I want to do? And everybody would ask you, oh, so what next? And I remember sitting in one of my final year lectures, kind of perusing, and I had this wonderful teacher, Dr. Alan Varnum, and, he was just teaching, and I just, the passion for the subject, and it just kind of thought, you could do this. And when I think about my journey, I always think about people, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But he inspired something in me, something that I wanted to be like, something, and I could see that I was very good, or at least people would tell me, I don't know if they were just trying to be nice, that I was very good at trying to take complex things and making them simple. And the patience to, like my mom would say, you're the only person I know that can repeat something 10 times without really getting upset. But I had never really seen myself doing a PhD. I don't know why, because I was very academic. I mean, Nigerian, the going to university is not a question. So you have a period at the end. It's not, are you going to university? So you're going to university. So I was always very academic. So when I got the opportunity to do my PhD with my undergraduate project supervisor, it was really an amazing opportunity for me. And I had an opportunity to teach as well, because it was a funded PhD and you had to kind of teach during the summer. So it really helped me to kind of test the waters about, do you really like this? Is this something that you want to do? And I was really committed that, okay, this is where it is, this is what I want to do. And when I finish, I'll get a teaching job. But finishing my PhD, I think that I kind of came into the reality of what academia looked like, particularly for someone that looked like me, because I don't know why it never really occurred to me at the time that, I had gone through my whole university degree, as an undergraduate, as a PhD student, without seeing anyone that looked like me, who wasn't like in the tech team or cleaning the university or at the reception. But finishing and getting into that job market I just put the squiggly line because there was a lot of uncertainty there for me. I was doing a part-time postdoc 2 days a week. I was working in a college as an admin person. I was teaching all over the country, from London to Coventry. But what I learned to do then, and if I can borrow from Nika's life lessons, is that follow the opportunities. Maybe they are few and far between, but you always learn something. So when I had an opportunity, my first lecturing role was actually not teaching microbiology per se. What I was doing was actually supporting students. So students within this widening participation university who weren't really doing well. And I was working on all the extracurricular stuff. And that was a very good intro into a permanent role for me, because I really learned that connecting with students is at the heart of what we do. We can do really lovely slides. We can say amazing things and publish in high impact factor journals. But if you're going to be an academic, if you're going to teach, you really need to connect with the heart with your students and have them at the heart of what you do. So, I like to say that I've been around quite a number of universities. I can't really count how many. In my current role, I serve as the course leader of our foundation year course, which is one way that we're trying to get more students from underrepresented groups into higher education. And not just bringing them in to participate, but to actually achieve. And I'm really proud of that work that I do within that context. Doing my research, fascinated by microbes and particularly what they do in food, the good, the bad, and the ugly, as I always like to tell my students. Next month, I will be moving from Westminster to the University of West London as a senior lecturer. And I'm really excited about that stage of my journey. So I've given a lot of titles and things I've done, but the truth is my journey is nothing without the people, without my family. And no, that's not my family in the sunset. They would kill me if I put them in a video that was being recorded. But, I had a whole team of, I like to call them my fan club. So the supporters who are with me day in, day out, when I make mistakes, when I wasn't sure, who gave me money. I always thank my parents, for giving me the privilege of going to university without, taking a loan or paying a dime. But I had the coaches, I had the people that pushed, I had my mentors, I had the sponsors that actually opened doors because, as someone who looked like me, it was really difficult to just be able to get into some spaces. And even I wouldn't say haters, but, maybe we say the demons, I don't know, but even them, because they helped me to probe into parts of me that I hadn't thought about. And of course, my students. So this is just my research family when I was doing my PhD. And again, I think I was really privileged to have a family, not just colleagues. So beyond titles and job descriptions, there are things I always take with me in any role, whether I was working as an admin assistant in the college in the morning and then running down to London Met to do something in the lab in the afternoon. I actually had 2 jobs in 2 different places on the same road. So I just ran up and down, Holloway Road in those days. But it's that, to just take my values with me. It didn't matter what I did or where I did it. And it was about being intentional and thinking about what I want the end picture to look like and working my way back to where I was and trying to take steps that will take me in the right direction. Really tapping into my creativity and realizing that, this is what I need to use to solve problems. And more importantly, building communities around whatever needs to be done. And we've heard some really great examples of that from the other speakers, because we know that there are many challenges in the space that we're in STEM. And if we are going to do something impactful about it, we're not going to be able to do it on our own. So happy to connect, and I can share this at the end of the session, but thank you so much for listening, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much, Amara. That was a really good, condensed, what I think your career journeys are condensed versions that I think if you decide to really give us the full versions, it will be an explosion of exciting content and exciting success. The next question we kind of wanted to find out from you was, I guess you probably touched on bits of that when you spoke, is who or what enabled you to get to this point in your career? And I know you touched on it briefly, but actually just maybe taking that time to think through it and then giving us a bit of your own opinion on that. We'll start with Nick.
Okay.
I think, as Amara was saying, there's so many people on the journey, and there's so many people at different points that were instrumental. First off is having my family and my dad in particular, who never ever thought, he always used to say, yeah, you can do it. He didn't say more than that, but so having someone kind of constantly supporting you, regardless of how you're feeling, I think is the first step. And sometimes, it's in your family, sometimes it's not. It's a friend, it's someone that is on the same journey as you, but it's so important to have that person that looks beyond the challenges that you have and can see that you can succeed regardless. So yeah.
Efua, same question to you.
Yeah, I think similarly, it started with the family. My mother and my father, again, they thought that I could do anything. They still probably do think that, and they constantly, well, my mum's around now. My father passed away, but she's always telling me I can do anything. And then on top of that, I've had a lot of, I think, mentors who didn't actually know they were my mentors. People who I've kind of looked and observed and become friends with them and built up a relationship and maybe even a network. And I have, casually talked to them, and they don't realize that I'm just trying to get advice, and I'm getting a lot of advice from them. And so I have had a lot of that. And again, similar people who are on the same journey as me, who I admire and I follow, and I think, okay, wow, they're opening doors. I'd love to be able to do that too. And so there are a lot of influences. Some people are more intentional, some people they don't even realize, and also that lovely firm base of family.
Thank you. And Amara?
Yeah, I have to agree with the other speakers. I think that when I look at my journey, and at every critical junction there was a person. So there was my undergraduate project supervisor, kind of sparking in me that I could do a PhD and be successful, because I'd never really seen that for myself. And it's weird because I was getting A's. Well, I don't know. I'd never seen, I think at the time I'd never seen a black person with a PhD. So, there's that thing they say about the power of visibility, that when you see people doing it, that you can see for yourself. I mean, Emmanuel, we go way back. You've been such a big part of that journey, opening doors, giving advice. I think of the role I'm going into now, that's based, on a relationship, because sometimes there are conversations that happen about you when you're not in the room, and you need someone in that space that's going to say something positive, or at least even knows about your work, because there's a way in which you can be invisible in some spaces. And sometimes you just need that one person to say, oh, no, actually, she can do that. I know I've seen the work she's done, and, she can do that. So I think people have always been, for me, the really, that important thread that kind of runs through everything I've done. I'm not saying I haven't worked hard. I have, but yeah, I've needed that.
Thank you. I think it's clear the initial unit, I think the family structure, the family unit, or the backers from the house who are pushing and telling you there's no to this answer, and then the other people along the journey. And I think you mentioned it, Efua, I think mentors, that side of thing around mentors, it's something which is really, really important, especially trying to break into that glass ceiling, whatever glass ceiling is, or breaking through whatever barriers are there. Mentors seem to be also very important, and those people who are your well-wishers, and I won't call them praise singers, but your well-wishers who are pushing you through those doors as well. I will pass the next question to Anne. Anne, I'll pass it over to you.
Right, so all of you have touched on some of the barriers, and we'd like you to sort of expand on that and kind of the strategies you adopted to some extent to overcome those barriers, since very clearly all three of you have managed to negotiate your ways around this, even though I'm sure some of them have been quite the equivalent of mountainous in terms of your experiences. Amara, would you like to start on that one?
Wow, barriers. I think in academia, there's I don't know, someone introduced me to this term about hypervisible invisibility, where you're hypervisible as the only, but you are invisible in terms of the space. And it kind of is a barrier, because people don't really see you, they don't see beyond the outside, I would say the container, to the potential that is there, that is on tap, sometimes even to the actual real value that is being brought to the table. No one sits at a table to make a decision and ask the question, who isn't here? It's something I've become very intentional about when we're trying to do anything at course level. whose voice isn't here? Is the student voice here? Is this person, you know, because, and we have such a diverse team. And one of the things I really try to do is to make sure that when I'm in any space, that we bring as many voices, because I see the power in that. And I think for me, trying to overcome that has always been to, again, seek out for advice, get the mentoring. I had a stage in my career where I think I just went into, you know, the kind of negative space where I just felt like I'd been pushing the door and it wasn't yielding at all. And I, you know, I was trying to maybe resign myself to the fact that, okay, maybe this is where I was going to be. But I think I had the benefit of really good advice, really good support. And actually, many of the times that I've moved so that I can progress. Because sometimes, you know, you can stay in the organization and try and do things internally, but sometimes you just have to kind of shift to grow, is what I think. So I'm one that is very keen on thinking about what is within my circle of influence and what is within my circle of control. If it's not something I can control, I'm learning to leave that alone, but I'm learning to work on those things that I can control. So yeah, I think that is one of the biggest barriers I would say I've faced.
Really, really interesting. Nike, would you like to expand?
Yeah, on barriers. I think it's, for me, at every stage in my career, I've had a significant barrier. Sometimes it's internal with myself, what I believe I can do and what I believe I can achieve. And sometimes it's external, because what you've been told so much of, you are this and you are that and you should be that you start to internalize the way that others see you, and you don't see yourself as how you should be. So I remember when I moved into industry and I was working for this demon, sorry, and every day he'd say something negative. Every day I'd go home and I'd be in tears. And I remember I actually had a black book where I used to write all the horrible things he would say to me on a daily basis. And because of that, I became very timid. I used to be called the mumbler, because I wouldn't actually say my words out, because I was so scared that I'd say the wrong thing. Even stuff I knew I'd struggle with. And for me, it took a friend of mine at work, someone that just noticed what was going on, and calling me aside and saying, I know what you can do. I've seen what you've done before you joined this organization. What you need to do is you need to find an ally. You need to find someone in your side. You need to find someone that has the same interests as you. And, you know, typical me, and I'll say this, suspicious of people, because I was just like, oh, there's all white men in this office and me. I really struggled to decide to kind of reach out to this person that was interested in radio design. But I reached out to him. First thing I realized is that his wife was an engineer. So he understood immediately what was going on. He took me under his wing. He'd take me to every meeting. I remember a particular meeting was very interesting, that someone said to him, oh, you know, Nike is great, but she gets emotional about radio designs. And he flipped that and he said, well, I'm getting emotional now because I'm very angry that you would say this. And I had to calm him down. So I would never have, if I'd never reached out to him, if I'd never told him I was interested, I never told him what was actually going on with the other person, I would have been, I don't know where I would have been, because I was emotionally terrified of that space. So I think the biggest barrier sometimes is actually internalizing what's been said to you. And I think breaking out of that really does help you to see that there are allies out there. There are people that will support you. You just need to find them.
Yeah, and I think you raised quite a difficult issue about the sort of impact and the kind of de-skilling or you know, kind of loss of confidence that can happen, and it makes it very difficult to actually climb out of that situation, you know, if there aren't people around who can, you know, you can go to for support. Okay, Efua, would you like to add to that, the barriers?
Yeah, I mean, just very briefly, I have the same kind of thing. And there are internal kind of barriers and external barriers. I was lucky in the first job that I ever had and held for almost a decade, that again, my manager, he was a white male, but he was a doctor actually by profession, and he was also just interested in artificial intelligence and using that to help doctors with diagnosis. And his wife was also a doctor, so he knew the challenges that, you know, being the only woman in a certain sphere could come with. And he was very much I think he was very much an advocate. He was a person who'd probably push for me when I wasn't even in the room. I ended up being pushed to I say push because as a new engineer, you're not really relishing the idea of going to a foreign country and giving a talk on a subject that you barely know, but he would often put me forward for these things. And at the time it was a lot of internal work I had to do to kind of feel that fear and do it anyway. And I find that has helped a lot. It's kind of a cliche thing to say, but it really is a case of, you might be terrified of all these things and these opportunities, but you just have to keep on doing it. You have to keep on putting yourself out there, and you have to just almost let the naysaying wash over you, because it's going to happen, but that doesn't mean it's the truth. And I think that's so those are the kind of the barriers that I kind of had to, the real ones that are challenging ones that I have to get over every day. When it comes to the external, some of the other things, there's one other thing that really helped me actually in my career. When I was a contractor, I ended up working for, one of my first contracts was at a startup where suffice to say, it was the guy I was working for was a bit of a charlatan. He kind of convinced me that there was a huge operation happening, and I signed up on the dot. And when I got there, it was me and another woman who was constantly asking me about when she was going to get paid. Alarm bells went off, and nobody else was in the office. And I realized this is not really what I was sold. But I realized that he'd managed to, for all the negativity, go and raise like hundreds of thousands of pounds to start this fake startup, or at least it was a startup that he believed in that was not working. And it kind of gave me the confidence that, I can do this properly. I can start my own business properly, and if this guy can go and do that, then I surely can, create something spectacular without, having to fake it. So this is my kind of like looking at other people and their mistakes, or their, what they've done, and learning from that as well. So those are the kind of the barriers that I think I've overcome, and things that have helped me along the way.
And I think there's a sort of follow-up to all three of you really, is the intersectional issue of being both Black and female, and whether that has further complicated aspects that you might or might know, whether it's sexist, it might or might not be racist, or it might be both. I don't know whether any of you have got further comments on that.
I have, yeah, I've had, when I share some of the things that I was told at work, people are shocked that, I didn't go straight to HR and report it, because in this day and age, they would have been sacked straight away. I remember walking into the office one day and someone saying, bearing in mind I was the only female, saying, "Do you realize you have the biggest behind in this office?" With a group of men who all laughed. I think about that now, and I'm very angry with myself, because that should have been something I would have reported. But because I'd been scared into the kind of shadows, I felt unable to do that, able to actually confront it. And to be honest, I think that that's the issue, that sometimes that we're trying so hard to fit in and not rock the boat, that we allow things to happen that shouldn't happen. And so from my perspective, I think I say this because I want people not to do what I did. Don't be like me, Kate. Report things like that. Those things shouldn't be acceptable, shouldn't be allowed. And I think the world is changing such that people are feeling a bit more confident, and I hope people are feeling a bit more confident that when they report things like that, something will be done. But I think it's really, really, if you take anything away, if you experience any form of, because that statement, if I was, I don't think he would have made that statement if I was a white woman. I don't believe he would have, and I don't believe he would have thought he'd get away with it. And it's a constant battle at work. Even today, I remember something was said to me when I got back from maternity, and someone said, "Are you going to go on site?" And I said, "No, I don't." And he's like, "No, you should, because I've got boots in your size." And that seemed like an innocent comment, but I felt that it was it was a bit of an odd comment, because I'd had history at the person, and I know it wasn't just a sexist comment. I knew there was something more behind it. But half the time it's hard proving that it isn't, it isn't. And I remember when I mentioned it to someone, they said, "Oh, so do you think it's racist or it's sexist?" I'm like, I don't care if it's racist or sexist, it's wrong. And so I think there's a constant battle as a Black woman. Personally, my feeling is, as a Black woman and as a Black man even, to prove that what's been done to you is because of your ethnicity rather than your gender for women, or rather than your work for men. So but I do think that's an issue in the industry, and I don't think that we're addressing it. Now, people know about intersectionality, but are we really addressing intersectionality? I don't know. I don't think so. Sorry, I sound so sad, but it's true.
Efua or Amara, have you got anything to add to that?
I think I totally agree with what Nika has said, because I think one of the burdens I feel is that you spend so much time in your head, is why is this happening to me? Is it because of this or this? And I think that is a burden that we definitely carry, that I would say the more represented groups in spaces don't have to. And it impacts on well-being as well. I often feel like when I get a question like this, I think for me, I've often felt like my race was more important than my gender in spaces, because first of all, I couldn't really see some of the things that were happening to me, happening to the white women I worked with. So I wasn't sure, it was really because you were a woman or not. And I saw how if I could put it in this way, that there's a way in which my pain or trauma in an event didn't really rank as high as what I would consider to be something less important. Not that, trauma is trauma, but it wasn't. Give an example of that. So I was teaching once, and I was using one of these audience, interactive polls with the students I was teaching. And one of the students responded with a racial slur. And it kind of, and I really get what you say, Nika, because in that time, I think I was just too shocked. And so, you know what, I just continued with my lecture as if nothing happened, as if I didn't see it or anything. And after the lecture, I was like, well, maybe I dreamt it. So I went back and looked at it, and I saw it. And I took it straight to my line manager to escalate to, and 1 week went by, no, nothing. I wrote an email and said, I'm actually really disappointed that nothing was done about this. And what I got back wasn't, it's, why are you you're not giving us enough time. You don't know what we've done. Till today, nothing was done about it. And I'm sure if it was something else in another space, there would be some way to do it. I got support from colleagues who heard about it and were absolutely shocked. But it got to a point where, the conversation was, she's trying to make us look bad. And so I had to step back, and I can understand the people who don't say anything, because we're talking about power. And when you're talking about, power differentials, sometimes you have to be careful, because these are the people that sign off on your promotion. And I knew that, I was thinking of going in for promotion the next year. I didn't want someone to to stop. So when people say, oh, I said, no, actually I'm okay. But it was months later, I actually realized that I wasn't okay with it at all. It had really done something inside my head. And it took me a long time to actually work through it and get over it. And it just, one of the things that made me think that this is not really a space where I will thrive, because, you know, this could, and I just imagine, so if this happened to a student, would we do something differently? Would we, you know, and I think it's just that, okay, you get over it, you know, just get over it. Because even though it's something that is painful to you, there is no recognition of how it could be. And because you don't have representation at senior level, somebody who would say, no, this is something so, you know, to actually take that on, you don't have a sponsor who's willing to talk about that particular type of incident in you know, I guess at the top of the building, as it were. So yeah, I think, you know, when people talk about women in science, I don't always feel like connected to that comment. We had Women in Science Day once, and I remember that there was a panel discussion, and it was all of my white female colleagues, and I just thought, you know, there's not that many of us, you know, you could just pick one, even if it's tokenistic. But I don't always connect with that. But when people talk to me about, okay, maybe Black Micro, that event, I feel more connected to it in a way. Maybe it's something I need to work on and think about more, but for me, it's more about safety. And if I had to choose one, I would choose to stay in a space with people I connected with, you know, as an underrepresented group based on race, not on gender, which, yeah, I guess maybe I need to think about more to myself.
Efua, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, just really quickly. I think what you made a comment there, it's now gone right out of my head, but just the last comment you made about people being with people who are of at least have a different race as well to help with that. I think for me, one of the things that stood out in tech especially, there are a lot of different potentially races, right? A lot of majority of maybe Asian, you might think, people in tech, male in tech, men in tech. And what I tend to experience is, when it comes to microaggressions, is people not being used to speaking to someone of color, let alone a woman of color. And again, from those groups, a woman in tech and in color is kind of blows their mind sometimes. I remember one particular job I was in where nobody could make eye contact with me. Conversations were had and it would be over my shoulder or to someone else. And that can be, you know, you can brush that off, that's nothing, but it does make you feel like you don't belong in those spaces when you encounter that on a daily basis. And I think one of the things you mentioned as well was about power and people being in higher positions. Being a contractor was one of the best decisions I made, purely because the power relationship when you're a contractor is very, very different to being an employee. You are in there to do a specific job. You're brought in sometimes, and most of the time, as an expert. And so I found that it was very, very different, the attitudes towards me. There was some sort of much more respect generally than I had when I was in a full-time role. So I don't know, that helps me realize that people, it's really about the management then, really, because if it's about power and if it makes a difference, that, you know, you see me as somebody who's been brought in as an expert and you can't say all those off things that you say to anybody else, then it's about the management structure of the companies that you're going to, and they have to create those protected spaces and to help welcome underrepresented people in those groups and break those barriers and fight those microaggressions, stop them happening. That's my 2 cents.
Yes, I mean, I thoroughly agree about, you know, kind of spending more time looking at race rather than gender to many respects, and also the issue either, you know, people not looking at you, or, you know, looking at somebody who's actually not the senior person in that particular case, but, you know, doing it by color coding rather than by seniority coding. Emmanuel, do you want to add?
Yes, I was good. It's a very interesting point that has been raised in terms of I think Amara, I think that point about, because we have these conversations around Athena Swan a lot of the time, and you ask the question around intersectionality and how that really comes into that conversation, because it's always the women in STEM conversation, but a lot of the time when you look around that conversation of women in STEM, there's no Black women in STEM in that conversation. And that's actually one of the reasons why, in terms of a theme, we felt that it was actually very key to bring out the narrative and the experience of Black women in STEM, because it is almost that anomaly when you go to certain fields. You guys from engineering, I'm sure that you go into a space and you're sort of looking like looking for a pebble in an ocean to find the next person, and that's how it feels. And I think even for us, Amara, in the UK, when you go into the scientist space, we literally almost know each other across the UK because we're looking for each other. We know who is here, we know who's in London, we know who's in Manchester. But the one thing I want to ask, I think maybe from a positive point of view, is what is that one thing about you that has made you stand above the rest? Because I believe for you to be where you are, there is something about you that has taken you above and beyond the competition, above and beyond even those who are sitting above where you are at the moment.
Maybe
I'll start with you, Amara.
I'll just say grit. Like I'm like white on rice. You know, you're not gonna get. I'll choose. To be honest, I'm an introvert. It might not seem that way. So I'm very quiet spoken, and there's a way in which people can take that as pushover. But I think what I've actually learned a lot is about that just sheer persistence to work on something until you get what you want out of it. So if it's a project, I just have to keep working on it until it's the best. Everyone knows that I will read the paper 10 times, 20 times, 30 times before it's submitted. As much as possible, there can be no error. I think it's something that came as a protective mechanism because, it's drilled in your head that you have to be twice as good. So you don't give yourself an opportunity to, undergrad, I would get a B and I would cry because I just felt like it had to be A's because it was the only way you were really going to be able to stand out anyway. But I've tried to spin that into a positive note and just use that and say, grit. When you have an opportunity to do something, when you have an opportunity to shine, just do your best, be persistent. When you have obstacles, see them as things that are in the way to where you're going to, but not to stop you, but for you to develop what you need to be able to overcome them as much as possible. So, yeah.
And I'll come to you, Nika. Thank you, Amara, for that.
No, thanks. That was actually, I really enjoyed listening. I really enjoyed listening to that, and I was just kind of taking it all in. In terms of positives, I think for me, it's been about becoming who I know I can be, regardless. Words of affirmation is so important to me, and sometimes I have to remind myself who I am. So for me, it's about eyes on the prize. Being sometimes tunnel vision isn't a bad thing. Eyes on the prize. AFBE has allowed me to understand that I have a bigger mission as well. I have a bigger mission than myself and my achievements. It's about getting to a point where you don't walk into my old when I worked at a particular company. If you walked in and you said, I'm looking for a Black female, there was 3 of us, and there was about 600 people in the entire building. And so for me, it's about that driving change and making sure that when I retire, there are lots of people, there's just so many of me that it's not an issue anymore. And I know it's slow paced, but that just keeps me going. That keeps me going where people are mean and horrible and rude, or are even positive in the way that they say, they're trying to be positive, but sometimes it's what's that word? It's condescending.
Or backhanded compliment.
Yeah, it's like someone ringing me up and saying, "Oh, I'm so glad you were chairing that meeting. I don't see lots of females chairing meetings." I'm like, Rachel chairs a meeting and Claire chairs a meeting, so surely why don't you just say what you want to say? And so for me, it's about just, grit. That's really important, and just realizing that it's more than just you, so that not walking away because someone's been a bit horrible to you, realizing that if you walk away, someone else has lost the chance to excel. So that kind of gives you a different perspective of things.
Actually, thank you very much for that. It's that, seeing that bigger picture. I think you've mentioned that, Amara's mentioned, Efua's mentioned that bigger picture. I think that's really important, but it's very hard sometimes, especially with all the things you've described. It's very difficult to stay in that frame of mind to be able to see that bigger picture and try and navigate that bigger picture. I think Anne and I, we've had these conversations many times where it's either you see the bigger picture or you literally just look in that narrow tunnel and just decide you're going in one direction, and that's it at this point. Efua, do you have anything to add to this point?
No, I mean, grit is definitely it. I'm definitely somebody who just doesn't give up. I've never really given up on much, and if I have, it's because I found an alternative. So it's not really giving up, it's finding a way around a barrier, and I don't see barriers as anything other than obstacles to jump over. I was pretty good at track, so that's all I'm about. So just keep going, try different things, maneuver it. Don't make it about you. Mistakes happen, just see them as learning experiences. Really are learning experience. That's what all they are, mistakes are. So yeah, just keep on going, keep on pushing.
Thank you. And I think at this point, it'll be useful for us to see whether we can get any questions from anyone in the audience. If anyone has a question, then we can pick up your question. If you want to ask a question, you can use the put your hand up tool and then ask your question of the speakers.
Nana, do you want to, because you had your hand up earlier, do you want to ask the question? Do you want to be unmuted, or do you want us to read the question in the chat?
Hi, Anne. Yes, I put the question in the chat box. You can read it for me. That's essentially the question I want to ask.
Anne, are you happy for me to read the question? All right, I'll read the question.
Yep.
I'll read the question. The question is, how have you dealt with work-life balance? Sometimes the pressure to work 2 times harder comes with personal sacrifices on that front. So how have you navigated this in your own career? So I'll start with Efua on that one.
Badly. I definitely work like I always have 3 jobs. So, I am the coding Black female head. I have my own company. I've also started another company to help women in tech. So yes, I also have a child. I just had a child. So there's a lot going on, and I am definitely not the best person to say whether to get that work-life balance. But what I have done since I've had my child is take the opportunity to reduce my hours. Something that's very, very difficult, but I think it's essential, is that you have to have, what are you working for? You're not working for the sake of work. I'm working because I want a world to look better than it did when I was coming up. And I have kids who I want to experience that, but I have to spend time with my kids. And that's one thing I remembered as a child, is my parents were always present. And I want that for him too. So I have to just be very strict about my time and work when he's asleep.
Thanks, Efua. I'll go to you, Nika.
I was gonna. I think you took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say, it's work-life balance is a myth. For me, it's a myth. Sometimes I work really hard, and sometimes I life really hard. So I don't. This pressure to have a work-life balance doesn't really work for most successful people. I think you just got to prioritize ultimately what matters to you. Is it your career or your family? Ultimately, you can build the best career in the world. For me personally, you can build the best career in the world, but if you have no connection with people, then it's a struggle. So for me, I gave up on the idea of work-life balance, and I just understood that sometimes I need to just focus on my family, and sometimes I can focus on work, but I will not try to balance both. It's just I gave up on that a long time ago.
Amara.
Oh, well, I think much of the same. I was in a mentoring session recently, and this question was asked because it was a group of women as well. And the speaker said that she doesn't believe in the concept of a work-life balance, that it's just life, and everything is in your life, and you find the space that you're going to put it in. And there's sometimes in your life that something is that big priority, just like Nika was saying about prioritizing, and sometimes it's something else. So I can't speak for mothers because I'm not a mother, but so I do think maybe I do work much more, very long hours compared to, I think, if I had little ones. But I think I see things as seasons. There are times that I will unplug. One of the things that changed my life, I think, radically was taking my work email off my personal mobile phone. And so that meant that, because it got to a point where I would wake up at 2 a.m. and the first thing, I'll just reach for my phone and not even look at my personal email. I just go for my work email because I want to see if I can deal with something before I sit at my desk at 9. And it's about, just like Nika said, what is really important? What are the big things in your life, and how are you going to fit them into, and just being able to say no, because some things don't serve your highest. I think that has been the biggest problem for me, that sometimes I should just do this, and I find it so hard to do it and just say, sorry, I'm not able to help with this. I'm sorry, I can't commit to speaking to this, or sorry, I can't even join this working group. It's a great initiative you're trying to do, but I'm not able to join you at this time. So I think that's how I kind of look at it, because I think we need to say no to the things that maybe not taking us in the direction we want to be in, and maybe be a little bit firmer on that, because we all need time. I think that idea of women are the great multitaskers, I just think it's a myth that someone somewhere, just because they wanted women to do so many things. Oh, there's another thing. As much as I can afford, I outsource things. So if I can, I know, I'm come from an African background, and that means, you're the one who does the cooking and some, this and that. If I can afford not to do something, I don't do it. If it means that I can sleep for 1 extra hour on a Saturday morning and I can get someone to come help me clean, I will do it. But again, that is a privilege, and I recognize that. So, think about your tribe. Maybe there's someone, who would be happy to come, maybe be with your kids for an hour while you, I take my nephews on all the time just to give my sister a break. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. I think it's quite clear that from the three of you, it is not a conversation around work-life balance. It's a conversation of purpose and priority in that sense. And I think that's a very good way to look at it as well, because I think it does give some perspective or maybe some guidance to people who are really battling with this thing of everyone constantly hitting with the work-life balance thing. But for you to be where you are as Black women in STEM, the conversation of work-life balance is it's a myth. It really doesn't exist. To be Black in STEM, to be in STEM, then to be Black in STEM, and to be a Black woman in STEM, yeah, you live in 300 lives at the same time. And is there any question we have so far from the chat, or is there any question else from someone else in the?
We'd really love to hear from people in the room. I know there's some quite interesting people in here, so any questions would be great. Sandra, do you want to ask a question? Do you want to unmute?
Am I unmuted now?
Yeah, you are.
Okay. All right. It's not a question. It's just I feel compelled to introduce myself, mainly because of something Nika said. She hates chemistry. I'm a senior lecturer in chemistry and biochemistry. So Nika, I look forward to making friends with you. Yeah, I'm really thoroughly inspired by everything that you've said. And I found the link to this to Eventbrite by chance yesterday. I thought, oh, I haven't come across this. So I just registered and joined, and I'm thoroughly inspired. So thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Another scientist in the house. Amara, another person that we need to tap into. I think there's a question that's just been put in the chat. I think this is for Efua. Someone says, I work at UE and responsible for identifying skills requirements for underrepresented people in digital engineering. How best do you think we can go about this? There was a seminar where people ended up talking about the challenges they face in the workspace or getting into employment, not necessarily the skill requirements.
Okay, so let me just summarize. Your question is, how best do I think go around helping with identifying skill requirements for the underrepresented? Yeah, I think one of the things that we do at Coding Black Females is we do train using boot camps to train women who are not necessarily in tech. So we have courses that we run because we know that those are the desired skills that the industry is looking for. We also have a lot of partnerships with companies, and they tell us about what the up and coming kind of technical skills that are really high up on the list of things that, you know, are desired in the industry. Every industry has some sort of different desired technology, but there is some consensus, and that's what we are currently working on, putting programs together to help upskill underrepresented communities in those particular skills. So speak to us because we will be able to help you. So at Coding Black Females, because we've been working a lot on these kind of things. Hope that helps and answers your question. I could give you a list as well.
Thank you, Efua. I'll just read a comment that was also made in the chat by Valder Jackson. It is heartbreaking to think that our young people must still work so hard to negotiate their way around the injustices that existed for her generation in the 80s and beyond, but it's also so gratifying to see and hear the power that each of you possess. I think it was worth mentioning that. So always onwards. Do we have any other questions?
Can I just quickly, I'm reading that question again, just the last bit of it. I just want to point out that you said, yes, there are challenges that aren't necessarily skill requirements. And what we do to address that is to do with the training as well. So there's a lot of things to do with underrepresented groups not having the confidence as well to get into those kind of places. And that can be mainly associated with, again, not seeing the faces of people in there. And also when you're in there, there's difficulty with retention because, again, there's no point in putting somebody in there and you're the only Black person in the room, which we've all been. It's not a comfortable place to be sometimes. So what we try and do is encourage companies to create networks and structures to do with mentoring and places that people can have community to kind of feel comfortable and talk about the issues, and also to help with the retention and to help with changing the culture. So those are some of the things that we work on, and again, we can talk to you about. Sorry, I'm done.
Okay, any other questions? I mean, I've got one which kind of, I think it follows on from an inference that Amara made in terms of kind of not really having the opportunity to make mistakes. Have you ever found that you know, because I quite often say it's actually, you know, as long as you learn from them, actually mistakes are quite useful. But I think there are times when you're in a situation where you're very isolated, when actually making a mistake can escalate into something more serious.
Yes, definitely. I think I'm trying to unlearn a lot of things at this stage in my career. I kind of feel like maybe this is a therapy phase for me, where so many of, because I think many of these things I wasn't very conscious about why I was just doing things, but I wasn't sure why I was doing it. So I would say I was hardworking and I'm a perfectionist, but I think it was really driven more out of fear than drive to succeed, because you're in a space where you see, and I'm going to be careful with my words here, but there is a certain kind of level of mediocrity that you do come across. But when you see the way it's celebrated, then you just wonder, what's going on here? And I'm sure, I'm not going to give specific examples, but, it's something that I've come across quite a lot where, something has come through and it's like, okay, wow, this is so amazing. And then you think, well, I've been doing this, I do this in my sleep, but it's not the same type of, praise or, it's almost like you're expected to do it. And I think that it's that, and so because you don't want to fail, you don't really push yourself beyond what you think is your comfort zone in the space where that, okay, yeah, if I do this, it'll be perfect. But maybe sometimes, and especially when you think about your progression, there are some things maybe I should have been pushing myself out to do a little bit more, maybe be, more visible in doing things, but because I just didn't want a situation where I would do it and I couldn't do that 100%, and then it would reflect badly on me. But I'm trying to unlearn many of those things. So I think definitely I would say that has been my experience. And just like what I said when I was at uni, I couldn't get anything less than 70%. It was like failure for me. And I just thought it was because I was academic, but it's later in life I realized it's just that I was afraid and I didn't want, it looked like a stain on like a perfect record. And I just felt like people wouldn't value what I had to bring. Or I was thinking, okay, if I want to get a job, if I don't have a first, it's going to totally cut me out of that opportunity. So this is why I'm pushing to do this. But of course, and now I tell my students, because I teach maths, not the kind of engineering. So I teach maths to our foundation year students. And I find that our students come in, because it's such a diverse group. I teach, mature students, students from different countries, students who, English is actually not their second, but their third or their fourth language. And, they come in with a lot of self-efficacy beliefs. And it's why I think that a lot of the work I do is not always necessarily about the discipline teaching. It's also the kind of giving the student a mirror to kind of look at themselves in and reframe what they see as something that, not that they can't do it, but they can't do it yet. And what we're going to work on together in my module, in this course that I'm leading, is to get you to the place where you are closer to that success, how you define it, than you were when you started, and that you can see yourself in higher education about learning how to learn, not necessarily that, I'm getting 100%. I want you to try and fail and grow. So we talk about failing forward in my class, and so that we can see failure as not such a negative thing.
Lovely. One thing I think, Amara, you made a point about celebrating mediocrity. I was thinking about this earlier. You are Black women in STEM, but we haven't really touched a lot on that fascinating thing about your STEM that people need to know, because you guys are scientists in your own right. You are technologists, engineers in your own right. So what is that one thing that you want people to know about your science, your STEM, your innovation, that thing that people need to know? What should be putting you on television, for example? That's what we want to know. What's your star quality?
Shall I go first? Yeah, so my one is interesting because when the 5G protests came, I was quite fascinated by how many people were so ill-informed about radio waves and the electromagnetic spectrum. I spent at least 4 years of my life in a chamber and a coke chamber, and I'm still alive. So what I did was then I did a YouTube video on the myths of 5G, and my thing is radio design, and I'm quite fascinated about how radio waves work within confined spaces like tunnels. I have a specific fascination for tunnels, and I have been lucky to work on most of the road tunnels across the UK. So if you want to know about the different tunnels, in the UK, from Brunel to Hindhead to Blackwall Tunnel, which I constantly point out the radio communications to my family every time we drive through, which I know is annoying, but I do it anyway. And that's my thing, ensuring, and to me, I always say to people, I use my word to save lives, because if you're a disabled person stuck in a tunnel and there's a fire, you need a mobile phone to be able to make that contact, and that's what I do. So yeah, I am saving lives. I may not be a doctor, a medical doctor, but I am saving lives by engineering radio waves.
Wow, that's incredible, incredible. Cool. I guess whoever is following this is going to be throwing something else at us now. Efua, you're going next on this one.
I don't have anything near as impressive as that. I think the one thing I want is more like a plea or shout out, and then it's always about machine learning and AI, and just how much of that is out there in the world today, and how desperately it needs more diverse voices to work on it, because it pretty much touches every aspect of our lives, everywhere. I don't want to make people paranoid, but it's following you everywhere, and we need to be there making those decisions and in those rooms. So on that note, these are the things that we're hoping to train people up on, and yeah, that's one of the most interesting aspects of tech that I think is emerging nowadays, and something that we all should be involved in.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Efua. And Amara?
Oh, okay. So I don't know. I'm just fascinated by things that we can't see. So microbes, they're everywhere. They've existed longer than we have. Probably will continue to exist. Maybe when we don't as a species, I don't know. But we have such an intricate relationship with microorganisms. They're everywhere in our bodies, and they're also in our foods. And in our foods, there are very interesting interactions, because microbes make food. If you've ever had kombucha or some kefir or some yogurt or some cheese. So microbes are actually these really inexpensive factories that do such amazing things. And one of the things I'm really, really interested in is to see how we can use microorganisms to kind of reduce some of the inequalities we have across the world when it comes to food security. So fermented foods are very long history, very rich history in Africa. And what we're trying to do is to see if we can improve the fermentation traditions and production methods to get foods that are safer, to get foods that are more nutritious. And so, I mean, I do other things with microbes, so I think that is the thing that is my sweetest spot in the work that I do, and trying to communicate science to non-scientists. So like really breaking it down, you know, many scientists, we love to put our work in peer-reviewed papers, but as the only scientist in my family, you know, my dad will, when I publish a new paper, I just send it to him so that, you know, he knows that all his money didn't go to waste on my education. But I know he doesn't read it because, you know, it's not his, you know, it's not his thing. And that got me thinking, you know, the work I do is relevant to him, but he's not going to know about it if I don't put it in an alternative space. So that's, you know, that's what I spend my time doing. Well, yeah, that's my science.
Fantastic. Really, really great areas, great interest. I think this is the sort of thing that we need to, when we share the communication, I think a lot of people will be really amazed by the breadth and the extensiveness of your expertise and the kind of people who are doing this great stuff that people watch on TV with people wearing big beards and old gray white hair and lab coats, when they should actually be watching people who are within this space having these conversations. But hopefully when we share this stuff, I think that's the sort of thing people will be speaking about. And I don't know if you have any questions or if you want to take things on from here.
Well, I do hope some of the sections in our faculty will be inviting you again to deliver your expertise. I'm certain that our coding courses in my faculty could seriously do with your input, you know, both in terms of representation, but also sort of aspirational in terms of that as well. Are there any more questions from the audience? You're being very, very quiet. I think they're kind of stunned by your brilliance here. Nana, do you want to ask a question? You're on mute. Do you want to unmute?
The host was not allowing me to unmute, so
Sean, tut.
It's the question I have is a fun one. Don't worry, it's not on STEM or anything intelligent. The reason I had my video off is because, as you can see, I have my afro out today, not my usual plaited and stuff. Have you ever felt pressured to look a certain way, black but not too black, in order to fit into the professional world? And then that has an impact on not bringing your whole self to work. So hair, how you look, makeup, try to make yourself less black or more white than you actually are in order to achieve the goals that you have as a black professional woman, whether in STEM or in other capacities.
Nike's going to have to leave early, so if Nike could answer that first, that's okay.
Thank you. Yes, so the answer to that is yes. I remember being asked to take some photos in the office for our annual report, and I had my hair in cornrows at the time, and the only other black female in my team had her hair similar. And our boss, our white boss, whose wife is black, said, you know, oh, can we get this other person because she's got her weave, so it will make the picture look less ethnic. At which point I was like, well, you've got a horrible ponytail. It's not very professional now, is it? But that's taken years of just having people kind of going to where people have touched my hair, come and touched my hair, or even black women saying, how are you keeping an afro? Because I've got like a, how you you know, why do you do that? You know, like it was a negative thing. So yeah, there's always been, and there was a time I used to kind of I do like having my hair in different hairstyles, so I will have a weave or whatever, and that's a choice. But the policing of hair is still happening a lot, and how professional people perceive you sometimes is still happening a lot, and so some people feel pressured to have their hair in a particular way. Now I just don't care, you know, I just do. You know, if I'm gonna have my hair in a big afro, you've just got to accept that I know what I'm talking, regardless of my afro. But yeah, sometimes you just feel like you're not really taken as seriously as you should be because of your hair, or because of the way you dress, or the way, you know, you expect it to be. Your mannerisms, your body language, you're not subservient. So that could be an issue too.
Great. Nike, I think you said you needed to leave by 7, is that?
Yes.
So yeah. Can we just thank you ever so for your brilliant contribution?
Thank you.
And you know, everybody, if you can applaud, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And sorry I have to leave now, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
great.
Bye.
Okay. Efua, would you like to continue with that question?
Yes.
The bad hair day.
Yes, I think there is a pressure. Funny enough, I think it's worse in the US potentially than it is in the UK. About, and I would say maybe a decade ago, it was all about having your hair straightened when you went into a workplace, and there was a lot of pressure about that. I'm thankfully, I feel like it's changing. So it's definitely this work from home culture has meant you're going to get us as we come, really, because no one's going out to the hairdressers for a while, right? And I also I did the big chop 5 years ago, so you know I'm about an afro. I really am. This is just so that I can function as a mother. That I have my hair in braids, protective styles, and I'm lucky again because working at Coding Black Females, I'm basically met with a sea of different hairstyles and bonnets and everything under the sun, and it's a very refreshing feeling. And I think we're taking that out with us into the workplace. We're having different hairstyles. Also, on top of that, I think in tech, you get a lot of different hairstyles there. You get, and it's not necessarily seen as, maybe when you're going into the more managerial positions, there is more pressure, but especially entry level, you can do a lot more. You can have blue hair, you can have wild styles. You know, there are a lot of people who come to tech who feel from underrepresented groups that aren't necessarily about skin color. It could be about choices that, you know, and things that you follow. So there is a freedom there that I think that I've experienced in tech that other people might not in different kind of more corporate roles. I think there's still pressure out there, but I think it's changing, and I'm definitely one to push for it.
Amara, do you want to?
I think maybe in academia, I think we tend to be more laid back when it comes to presentation. I think I don't feel like I've really had any pressure with respect to how I look, but I think definitely in my actions. So even as I'm talking now, I'm a very when I'm teaching, I'm like this. And I think there's a certain way that I feel like I police myself more when I'm at work than I would when I'm in a relaxed space, because I don't want to be the, you know, aggressive, you know. I remember there was a day a student told me that I was intimidating. And I just thought, okay, although he didn't put it into words what he meant. And I was actually quite shocked, because I actually think, you know, I'm a pretty chill, laid back person. And it just kind of reinforced that thing to me, that even when I'm really, really angry at work, I will never change the tone of my voice. I will never, you know, and I'm not saying now, you know, you go to work and shout, you know, but I try not to be too exuberant. I mean, I call it exuberance, but I know that it could be interpreted in a different way. So I think that's the part I think I police myself. With the hair, I go all the way from, you know, wearing a scarf, you know, especially when we went into lockdown. I was like, no, you guys come into my world, welcome. And, you know, I just started turning up, you know, in meetings. Yeah, but I think I do it more to puzzle my colleagues, so that, because they don't know what's going to come up next week. But yeah, I think for me, it's just a bit of fun. But I've never felt like, okay, I have to be like this, you know, or speak in a certain way. Yeah, but I think I definitely do police myself with regards to my emotions. And yeah, you know, just keep quiet, always calm. Oh, I don't think I can afford ever not to be calm. Yeah, in a situation.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think also just in terms of hand movement, I remember one of the workshops we ran, a woman, erstwhile person at UE, who was from an African Caribbean background, saying that she kind of censored her hand movements, that culturally she would normally be moving her arms around quite a lot, but when she got into work, she'd stop moving her arms. And I just had this sort of vision of somebody with their arms kind of straight down their sides, not kind of, you know, looking like a sort of robot almost, kind of not, you know, not articulating. And it's because of this charge of being seen to be aggressive, I think.
I'm just looking at the chat to see if there are any questions. I think what we just have so far are comments. And someone said, thank you for sharing your science experiences. I've heard very few talks from Black female scientists. It's very refreshing. So thank you very much for the comments, and also thank you to our speakers for actually being very refreshing and being scientists and coming to talk about science and great science. There was a question that as we're not having any questions, I can't see any hands up. I was going to ask this. In the last year, just over 1 year, we've been dealing with a very different world. We've had the COVID-19 outbreak, and then we've had the George Floyd incident, which sparked a lot of outrage globally. Because of that outrage that was sparked globally, we saw, because of that outrage, we saw a lot of organizations releasing statements. around inclusivity, equality, diversity, anti-racism, and all of that. So far, in your experience, do you think a lot of these statements are backed up with any action? And is there any organization that you can say from your experience that is actually doing the right thing or going in the right direction, especially maybe in your field, in the STEM fields or education?
Okay. I don't want to be cynical, but I do think there is currency now in EDI. You know, EDI is sometimes I take I think I like to think I'm a pragmatist, that sometimes does it really matter why people are doing things as long as they do it. But then there's the part of me that always thinks that if you want to create, you always start with why. And if your why is wrong, maybe what you build on top of that why will be wrong as well. I think that, I don't know, you shared something from Professor, I think her name is Professor Monica, I can't remember her surname now, that said that she didn't want to see, something to the effect that she doesn't want to see statements, she wants to see data. And I think that that's the space I'm in. So, you know, the statements are fine, but let's start looking at the evidence. Science is about evidence. So we want to look and see what exactly you're doing to make a difference. I am part of the Society for Applied Microbiology. Emmanuel is as well. And one of the things that, yes, thank you so much. Yeah, Professor Monica Cox. And one of the things that, as a society started to do is to start an anti-racism working group, which I joined. And I think that from what I see in that space, we are really trying to do something to listen, to learn, because I think there's always this drive just to do first. And I think sometimes you really have to understand what the nature of the issues are. So there should be that space for listening and learning. So that's an example that I would give from my space, but I wouldn't know in other places what they are doing. But my thing is, I just want to see the evidence of what you're doing. A statement is fine, but if we really want to change, we're going to change things. And by changing things, we're doing things differently. And there must be some sort of evidence to back that up.
Thank you, Amara. And Efua?
Yeah, so from the Coding Black Females, we basically, what we saw was a very large number of companies approaching us directly after the George Floyd. And we definitely tend to try and not just go with the gestures, but also ask those questions as to, well, what more are you doing? We don't want to put your company on our site or work with you if all you're doing is just saying, look, we work with this group. What are you actively doing to encourage and retain underrepresented and diverse people in your company? And what can we do to help you with that? And I'm seeing a lot of companies are engaging in that, and they're trying. They don't know how. They need guidance and they need help, but they are trying because of the kind of reports that have been out there, which also show and that as a company, having a diverse team of people does affect the bottom line. You will make more money, and that's what companies generally want to do. They want to be profitable. So we're not only helping, you're helping yourself, because why else encourage, you know, you're helping yourself and you're helping us, and we are there to help you basically, and we are seeing some change. I wouldn't like to name any particular company because I still feel that we're at the beginning of this journey, and it's about seeing how they continue to do this, not just this one, not just one-off gestures. Let's see how it is next year and the year after that.
Yes, there was a piece, I think, I can't remember whether it was in The Guardian or whatever, but it was looking at influencers, Black influencers, and the amount of contact they got immediately after the George Floyd murder went up massively and then has gradually tailed down over the last year. So it's whether or not it's a peak, you know, because of the murder, and whether it will sort of sustain itself in terms of that interest, in terms of moving things forwards.
And I don't know if you would like, I think it might be useful if you talk about, just even if briefly, about some of the stuff that's going on in Bristol, because I think as much as we think about institutions or organizations, having a citywide approach to a conversation around equality, discrimination, inclusivity, which is happening in Bristol, I think it's a very good way to actually drive a lot of organizations into the same space and to be held accountable and responsible for things that are going on. Because I know Anne is actively involved in. Anne, do you want to say anything about that as well?
Well, I think one of the things that has happened in Bristol is that a commission for on race equality was founded a couple of years ago, and it reset itself.
Anne, you're on mute. You froze.
You're on mute.
Yeah.
Right. So, did you hear anything?
I think you might need to start again.
Right, okay. I can remember what I said. Okay. So, yeah. So one of the things that happened in Bristol was following on from a race equality manifesto steering group that was founded several years ago. It's decided to form a commission on race equality, looking across Bristol in terms of equalities actions, and so there's been a link up, at least in sort of organizational terms, sharing the work and actions being taken, and that's included a strategic leaders group which comprises public sector organizations coming together to at least come up with sort of mission statements. It's debatable how successful those actions have been, but at least there's a conversation and a sharing of information, and also identification of where the data is missing, let's say, as well, because there are issues about either collecting the data or collecting the wrong data, or not producing data that's sufficiently granular to look at the issues. But I mean, Bristol is a city that is, was singled out by the Runnymede Trust as one of the most segregated cities in relation to educational and other indicators of deprivation. So it's certainly obvious that in Bristol, across the city, there is a lot of work that needs to be done. And I think the issue is, in order to do that, the issues need to be understood, and it also needs to be, run on a social rather than a deficit model. And I think sort of Mara's sort of indicated the working group that she's involved in. I think one of the things we found is an absence of willingness to acknowledge the problem or the extent of the problem. And that is one of the sort of biggest, and then also not I think you referred to mediocrity, Amara, but also willingness to listen to people who do have the expertise and the lived experience. And I think that probably impacts across probably higher education as a whole, but it also, I think it impacts on things like the health service and other areas of work. So I'd suspect that probably quite a few businesses are rather ahead of the game, perhaps, than higher education. I'm not sure. I don't know what both of you think on that one.
Amara, is there something you want to pick up? Where you see the sort of higher education sector in comparison to industry in this conversation. I don't know, Efua, maybe you might also have something to opine on this, because you kind of straddle those two different areas as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the challenge in HE, whether it's a size thing or it really seems quite difficult to I don't know, to change things. in HE. I think we have all these kind of peaks and troughs. So, you know, we're now a kind of like a decolonizing and EDI kind of peak. But then you go back and you think 10 years back, like some of the things that we were saying, and did we actually change anything in any of these kind of moments? Well, maybe I should call them moments that we've had. And I agree 100% with Anne about that. If we're unwilling to acknowledge the extent to which this is an issue, how are we really going to solve it? Because sometimes I feel the approach is really trying to put like a plaster on a bleeding artery, and you know, you don't really get far one way or the other. I think maybe in industry, and again in higher education, maybe our bottom line seems to be quite disconnected to us as individuals. So I mean, there are people that know the ins and outs of what the kind of financial status is, but you know, as an academic, I'm not counting, okay, I've got 100 students in my class and that means I've made X amount of money this year and I need to do, you know, I don't really think in those terms. But I think in industry it might have a more impact, so maybe it's faster to actually get things done. I don't know, so I don't know if I answered the question or contributed, but I think those are my thoughts regarding kind of that industry HE space.
Efua, is this something you want to comment on?
Yes, I mean, I think for companies, there is a direct bottom line that they can measure and they can see the impact of. But we also have to work with a lot of universities because we're going to be encouraging people, especially in tech. There's a lot of call for graduates to get on these programs. So there's definitely a link between companies that goes back to them even having maybe a relationship with the schools to help with the industry and encourage that kind of change. So there might be some sort of flow that way to help if the universities are can't see the direct impact, measure it so easily. You can measure it with numbers and the amount of people coming through. I know from my experience at university, I was like one of the very few Black people, one woman who did my degree course. And that kind of pipeline, it's not going to reflect very well in the tech industry if you don't have that influx. We're addressing it now, I have to say, with boot camps, which mean that you don't necessarily have to have a degree, but you can still get into tech that way. There is still, I think, a little bit of stigma attached, and degrees are seen sometimes in some particular fields to be preferred to help you get into tech. So it is important to universities, and I can see that they need to, there's an issue that can be helped and addressed, and they can work with companies maybe to help with that, if that makes sense. That's one way of doing it.
I think, I think the way higher education should be doing it, but I think they're reliant on students being ignorant of, for instance, the awarding gap, is that students of colour, certainly UK home students, represent something like 26% of the student population, BME students, and obviously there's a very large international student contingent. So they're paying a lot for getting a lot less out of their education, I think, at the moment in terms of awarding gap figures. Alicia's got a question. How do we keep Black students motivated with so many barriers in university? And that might be from your experience, Efua, and Amara's experience having been through a university experience, but also Amara's in terms of watching what's happening to students.
Wow, that's a heavy question. I think I'm still going to come back to people. When I think about my university experience, I think one of the big things for me was I describe it as finding my community really early. And to be honest, I don't really think at the time we were thinking in terms of race, but we're a group of people across different courses that kind of met in one large module in the first year, and maybe just kind of realized that we would be safe together. And so we just stuck together all through. And it was a very it was a source of inspiration because, you know, when we went through the hard modules, you know, where the module, you know, you don't understand anything in class and you're going to spend 5 hours trying to study just to understand what the 2-hour lecture was about. You could do it together. And I think that would have been so different if I had to do that by myself. And being able to develop relationships, not just with the students, but with the staff. And with the staff who were willing to kind of, you still had the boundary, the professional boundary and the respect, but they saw me as, not just a kind of name on their module list, but as a person who had fears, who had dreams, who had aspirations, and being able to like motivate. Like I keep saying, I don't think if Alan hadn't just posed that question, oh Amara, right? Have you ever thought of doing a PhD? I'm not sure that's something that would have just come naturally to me, because I would have said, okay, yeah, I think I can teach, but maybe I should do a PGCE instead. I think that one of the things I'm really passionate about is really getting, because most of my work is with students in their first year at university, and I know when I show up that my students, about 80% of them have already had a negative experience in learning, either because they are coming through, they've not been in education for a long time. And one of the reasons they haven't been is that, they're recovering from what has happened in the past. And I like to start with honesty. Why are we here? What is this dream that you have? What is the purpose for being here? And explaining my role to them as someone who is going to be, I'm going to be a coach sometimes, because you have a dream and you have to, get there. But I'm also going to be a supporter, a fan, and I will do all that is within my capacity to connect you to that space and make sure that you have a positive experience. But I tell them that is not going to detract from being able to develop positive relationships with themselves. So I try and create spaces where that can happen, whether I'm just, especially this year where we've been online, I did so many extra things. We even had like a games night just to kind of have a non-academic, kind of maybe flat structure space where we could all just come in and relax. And I think them getting to know each other, even though they didn't meet, a lot of them told me at the end of the year that, I feel like I made friends, and it's weird because we've never met in person, but I feel like that friendship was really what got me through, because some of them call me Miss, because it's the first year at uni. They kind of grow out of it, by second year, but they're like, Miss, as nice as you are, it's not the same because you're a teacher. It's like knowing that, someone who was in the same class with me kind of gets it a little bit more. And the fact that I can tell them and I feel like I'm not in this alone was really, a good thing for me this year. So that's what I think.
Efua, do
Yeah, I mean, I would totally agree with that. It's been decades since I was at university, but when I was there, one of the things that I can say is having that group, having that network, even of women who were not on my course, was very helpful to keep me going. One of the things I really wish is I had joined some of the groups that were maybe specifically for groups like me, so I could have spoken to people who, may have had some experiences that I hadn't and I had yet to encounter. So that is definitely a way to get through university, to feel part of something, because it's easier to not want to be there if you feel disconnected. So I would encourage that and continue that afterwards as well, because that network is going to be with you. If you build a decent network, it's a good start as well, and continue afterwards building that network too.
I think one of the negative things that's come out from, say, an academic or academics making comments is the "where they sit" comment, which is a bit like a group of Black people, they're a gang, whereas a white group of white people, they're a friendship group. So it's sort of, and in some instances being used to justify or substantiate the awarding gap. Sorry, Mara, did you want to chip in there?
So sorry, I just wanted to put this in, just especially based on the last year. I think sometimes the students need an advocate. And I think this is something higher education really needs to take on board, that it can just become, I'll come and teach you about, microbes and disappear. Students they have to navigate quite a number of intricate different support systems in the university. So for us, some students need academic learning development. A lot of our students have needed, counseling. And we often think that, okay, we have a website and all this information is on the website and you're able to navigate whatever service you need. But sometimes we really need to do more in helping students to actually get to that space, because I work with many students that it's nothing to do with the academics. It's everything else. It's, I was very shocked to hear that when one of my students told me that she was actually a full-time carer for both of her parents. And, I wouldn't have, but that was because a wonderful support system had been put in place for her. That meant that she could, get to class, she could, do the work. And if that wasn't the case, it wouldn't have been, about whether she understood what we were teaching. She wouldn't have done well anyway. So I think that role of an advocate, and maybe how as academics or how the institution puts it in place that we can work and interface with our students. I always say, we need to know our students. We really need to know them. We need to know the student who isn't showing up because they are the one who takes their mom to, and that happens a lot, takes their mom to the doctor's appointment to be a translator, or takes their younger ones because of something that has happened. So students are they're students, but it's not their only identity, and I think that we really need to recognize that as well.
And I think we have someone who, thank you, Amara, for that. I think we have someone who wanted to make a point. I think we'll ask a question. Is that Lilia?
Yes, hi.
Hi, Lilia.
Hi, my name is Lilia. Let me just, hello. Quite nervous, but thank you very much for sharing all this amazing journey. So I'd like to present myself as a Black woman and African with a Portuguese background in the UK. So I have a different perspective from Portugal and something else in the UK to compare. So there's quite a lot of things in my mind now, but and I had for my master's degree a different perspective as immigrant as well, a migrant with English as a second language. So, but the challenges are quite similar. But one of the things I would like to say is comparing as well to Portugal, which is the basic, or even in other, for example, settings, bank or any other customer service, you don't see Black people, even a bank or just for customer service, which is quite challenge when as well going to a scientific or academic route. I was quite only the first, the only, and then the list goes on. But comparing with when I did my second master's in UK, I think more, I had to say, a positive view, because for me, I know the disparity is big, the gap, but it's quite, for me, is a lot. And in spite of the challenges, I don't know, let me try to remember, because I don't know, I have so many points now, but I want to be quick. What else? So I think for me, as a Black woman, it's not like the motivation, but for me, it's the personal issues, as the family responsibilities, as financial issues as well. But I think it's more than that as well, because our community, and especially Portuguese and West Africa, which is different from other communities, for example, Nigerians, and with more link to the UK. But for me, the setback was this, to be assertive to my family, or even explain, or even now, I started my PhD with 30 years old. And then other challenges, pressures about, I know it's quite similar in other communities or white communities about getting married, doing this, but in Black communities, is even more, you can feel out more than comparing to other ones. I think for me, it's more like the personal issues, and then organizing, managing my time, even at the workplace, than I don't know, motivation. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think you know, some of the conversations we're having at UE it isn't just about the culture within the institution, it's also about experiences outside the university and to what extent those impact on people's experiences and whether they impact on the, you know, kind of their outputs as well as, you know, the other areas. I think we've got, if people are okay, is it okay for us to have one more question? I think there's one more question in the list. We've run over slightly. So I'll just ask, I hope this is okay for Efua and Amara if we just have that last question. So I think it's, have the challenges you've faced as a Black female in STEM influenced your career progression decisions over time? And I'm assuming that might mean that, you know, you might have made changes in terms of your career direction perhaps, or even discipline. Efua, do you want to?
Yeah, I think for me, it was always, and this is something that's often said, you have to kind of see it to be it. And I didn't, said it kind of a few times, because it didn't even enter my head. I didn't see it. I didn't see people who were in managerial roles or bosses of these companies or startups. If you think about tech startups, you'll be able to name, you know, 50 tech startups that have male founders. You don't find a lot of tech startups that have female founders, and not a lot of successful ones either. And for me, the challenges I had were to kind of start my company in the face of nobody else out there who I could see like me succeeding. And so, did they affect my decisions? It probably delayed me starting a company quite a bit until I experienced lots of, because you have this thing. And it's often said that when women are applying for jobs, you have to meet 100% of the criteria before you apply, and men generally go in with 50% and less and blag it. So you can imagine starting your own company. I thought I had to know this, and this, and this. And having experience with other startups when I was a contractor really helped me. But again, I think it delayed my career in that I kept on looking for examples before I wanted to leap sometimes. And I think that you can't wait for that basically now.
Amara, do you want to?
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, I think there was a certain naivety I'd come into academia with, that, you know, just put your head down, do the hard work, be the best, and everything will be smooth sailing from there. Well, I think one of the biggest challenges for me was, I call it the shifting goalposts, that, you know, in policy and on paper, they say this is what you have to do to go to the next level. But then you see some people not really meeting that and going to the next level. And then you see other people doing more than that and not going to the next level. And then you wonder, it's like, when it's your case, so you have to, you know, bring in the money and have the PhD students and publish 100 papers and all. And then you see the person who didn't supervise any PhD students, who's never been a course leader, who doesn't do PhD supervision, and then, you know, they get promoted, and then you get a bit confused. And I think it's why I then decided to take the view much later. I think it took me quite a while to wake up and even begin to see myself as, you know, getting to some levels, because I think I'd really given myself a ceiling already, you know, and I thought, you know, this is awesome. Well, Mandy, I don't know if Mandy she's just retired from UE, but I had a conversation with her and we were talking, and she said, oh, you know what, you know, this is kind of like how a HOD talks, you know, in terms of the admin, this is what needs to be done and everything. And I just burst out laughing. And she just said, what do you mean? Why is it that is such a preposterous thing for you to achieve? And until she said that, I never realized that it was that it was not something I had ever dreamt could ever happen for me. And again, it goes back to, I've only recently for the first time met a Black woman who is the head of school of a science, you know, in a university. So now I think what I've done is just to break that myth that this is the ceiling of what I can achieve, and I don't have to have 1,000 papers to do this. But I think for me, I've decided that I will move into spaces where I can thrive. And so if it means that I kind of go, anyway, my journey has always, it's never really been like going up the steps. It's more like going on in the whirlwind sometimes is how I feel, but I'll do what I need to do. But I think I now prioritize well-being in a way that I didn't before. And so I really need to be in a space that I feel like will support me and that I will thrive in. And yeah, so that's how I'm going. Or that's my plan anyway.
Great. Well, I think we need to call it. Thanks for staying over longer than we scheduled for. But thank you for giving fantastic talks and fantastic answers, both of you. And I think, you know, I'm sure people will be following up on you. I will be trying to force my faculty to invite Efua as one of our equity speakers, I hope, and certainly if that fails, trying to get you to come and speak to the coding students, computer programs. That would be fantastic if you do that, because again, Black female faces are very rare. I think I'm the only UK Black person in my faculty. So we don't, there's not that many visible faces floating around, particularly female. I think there were two more Black females in my faculty. So we're kind of improving a bit, but certainly it's not that, you know, we're not one of the, we're certainly not in any of the leagues for representation. I think Emmanuel would agree on that. Okay, so okay, so thanks everybody for coming and attending, and it's very clear from the comments in the chat that they've really you know, learned a lot, and it really enjoyed you know, listening to you and you know, hearing from your knowledge and expertise around your careers and experiences.
Thank you so much for the invite. It's been really great. I've loved it.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been such an honor to share a platform with these amazing women. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, both. It's been
plus
a
man,
pleasure.
Sorry, I forgot. Amazing women and men.
Women and men. Women and men. We're inclusive.
And that man.
Women and men, yeah.
And to Sean, who is actually behind the scenes doing the tech work as well. Sean is the chair of this this network, the Critical Race and the Culture Network, which we only started last year, Yui, and we put on this series of events, and we plan to do more, because it's really important that we carry the narratives and the voices of the people like yourselves who have been on this platform today, and also everyone who is in the audience and contributing to this conversation as well. It's a very long journey, as I think from your conversations, we're not talking of something that only started last year, we're talking of decades of work. But I think it's clear from just listening to you guys that you're seeing yourself as part of that change for that future. That future needs to be different, and I'm hoping that these series would really enable that future that we're all hoping that we get to see for the people that are coming behind us as well. So from my side, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for your amazing contributions and expertise, and it's great to actually watch Black women doing STEM in the way STEM should be.
Great. Thanks ever so.
Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.